be focusing on 5 most important topics from the Hindu, right? And these topics will give you a holistic perspective of the 5 topics. And trust me, if you develop command of these 5 topics, trust me, you have all the good chance to score good marks in your UPSC examination. So make sure you're fresh, you're attentive, you have pen and paper so that you can jot down the points. Running notes will have DNA notes, don't worry about that. But running notes is also very important. So make sure you're fresh, attentive, and all geared up to understand the 5 topics of the day, right? Before we begin, let us motivate ourselves with a beautiful motivational quote. And what is the quote? In order to succeed, we must first believe that we can. There are a lot of questions people, or for that matter, students have in their mind. Will I be able to clear the UPSC examination? How many attempts would I take? So all these questions are demons, right? And that's the reason the first and foremost rule before you start preparing for the UPSC examination is to believe. If you believe, all the energy action will be reoriented in the direction of UPSC success. And that's the reason believing and working on that belief that you will definitely clear the UPSC CS examination if you follow the right strategy. And that's the reason believe, work in that direction, and UPSC success will definitely kiss your feet, right? So now a very good news for all of you. Soon Narayana IS will be launching a 1 year and 2 year prelims cum means integrated online course. All the interested aspirants who want to clear the UPSC examination should definitely enroll in the 1 year and 2 year classes. These classes will be comprehensive, will focus on prelims, mains, as well as once you clear the mains examination, will help you with the interview guidance. Now, the USP of Narayana IS is that every week you'll have tests, both prelims as well as mains. So, all what you have studied in 1 week, you can gauge yourself by appearing the weekend test. Now, this weekend test, the questions that will be asked in the weekend test are of high quality. They are UPSC standard questions. So, by attempting those questions, you will be in a position to understand the position that you are at, so that you can gauge yourself as in with respect to efforts that you need to put with respect to which subjects. So that's the reason weekend test will be very key or extremely important in your UPSC success. So make sure you enroll in this 1 year and 2 year classes, right? So all those interested, there's a QR code on your screen. Please scan the QR code, register yourself, and our team will get back to you, right? Okay. So again, once you enroll in the 1 year and 2 year online course, you'll be getting 12 Navigator NCERT books plus 21 GS Navigator books along with the optional books, right? So, which are the topics of the day? The first topic is taken from Hindu page number 10. Now, in the first topic, we'll understand the interconnectedness of food security and energy security, right? So, first topic is very important from GS3 papers point of view. The second article is taken from Hindu page number 11. Now, given the stress at the workplace, right, the author of the article tries to highlight that India needs to legislate or make a law with respect to right to disconnect from the workplace, obviously after office hours, right? The third article is taken from Hindu page number 1. Now, this is a very important observation from the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court stated that reservation cannot be granted on the basis of religion, right? So, what led to this observation of the Supreme Court, we'll understand in the third topic. Fourth, frigate INS Tushil Commission. So, we'll understand what exactly is frigate and how it is different from the aircraft carrier. The fifth topic talks about the overuse of antibiotics in the poultry and the dairy sector and how it affects health of the people. So these are the 5 topics that we'll be discussing today, right? Again, as I said, make sure you're fresh, you have a pen and paper to jot down or make running notes. So, what is the title of the first topic? In energy dependent world, the issue of food security. So, in this article, as I told you, we'll understand the interconnectedness of the food insecurity and the energy insecurity. Now, this you can map under both GS paper 2 as well as GS paper 3. In GS paper 2, as part of the policies that the government frames, right, you can fit this topic under that subtopic. And then with respect to GS 3, Indian economy, right, and planning, mobilization of resources, etc. So, now this was a question asked in the year 2022. Clean energy is the order of the day. Describe briefly India's changing policy towards climate change in various international fora in the context of geopolitics. The focus is on clean energy, that is, the focus is on renewable sector, right? Why? Because energy security and food security are interconnected. This is the essence of the topic. Now, as I told you, for the global stability, for the global stability, it is very, very important to understand the interconnectedness of the food system and energy system. Now, if I talk about food insecurity and energy insecurity, now what is the reason behind food insecurity? One, climate change, right? Because of erratic extreme weather events. Second, because of population. Third, because of inequality. This leads to food insecurity, right? And if I talk about energy insecurity, for example, poor infrastructure, right? So, poor infrastructure, then the geopolitical tensions. Let's say, for example, Russia and Ukraine war. Now, there is a shortage of oil. So, these factors, the geopolitical tensions, the global tensions, right, outdated infrastructure, this leads to energy insecurity. So, if there is energy insecurity, if there is shortage of, let's say, oil, then this affects the food production and it leads to food insecurity. How? We'll understand this in the next slide. All in all, it is important to remember that there is interconnectedness of the food system and energy system. What is energy? Coal, oil, natural gas, this is energy. Food, food production. And that's the reason it is very important that whenever we focus on solution, the solution has to be integrated, which means we cannot study, or which means we cannot have solutions for food insecurity and energy insecurity in isolation. There has to be integrated solution, right? So first and foremost, let us understand what exactly one means by food security. Now, this is what you have to mention in the examination if a question is asked. In the year 1996, the World Food Summit defined food security. And what is food security? Food security exists when all people, right? All people all people at all times have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food that meets the dietary needs and food preferences. Which means the focus is that when we You hear the term food security, which means people, all the people belonging to each and every religion, caste, creed, at all times should have physical and economic access to nutritious food. What do you mean by nutritious food? Now, nutritious food means the combination or the blend of macronutrients and micronutrients. What is macronutrient? Carbohydrates, proteins, fats. These are known as, macronutrients. Now, the Indian food focuses largely on macronutrient, and in the macronutrient we focus more on the carbohydrates. We do not focus on the micronutrients, for example vitamins, vitamin A, B1, B6, B12, vitamin A, vitamin C, then minerals, calcium, phosphorus, potassium, zinc, manganese. So these are micronutrients. So food security, which means when people are in a position to avail or access the macro as well as micronutrition, that is nutritious food. I hope you understood the definition of food security. Now, let us try to understand the key challenges with respect to food insecurity and energy insecurity. First and foremost, over reliance on fossil fuels, right? Now, when I say over reliance on fossil fuels, see, agriculture, the backbone of the Indian economy, is heavily focused on fossil fuels, right? Fossil fuels for what purpose? For mechanization, fertilizer production, fertilizer production, transportation. The agriculture sector is focused on the fossil fuels, which means you see that the agriculture, right, is focused on the energy system. Why? Because you need oil, diesel, right? Let's say for irrigation, you need irrigation pumps. For irrigation pump to operate, you need electricity. For electricity, you need coal. So here you see that the agriculture is only dependent on the fossil fuels. And this dependency on the fossil fuels is exposing the food system to volatile price shock. Which means let's say because of Russia-Ukraine war or Israel-Palestine war, there's shortage of oil, there's shortage of natural gas, which means now we do not have energy security. Why? Because of the geopolitical tension. And as there is shortage in the market, it leads to increase in the prices of essential commodities or food. So over reliance on fossil fuels in agriculture is causing a big problem, right? Now if you see that the agriculture sector is responsible for 20% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So of all the greenhouse gas emissions, agriculture sector contributes 20%. And of all the groundwater resources, agriculture sector is using 70% of the global groundwater resource. And because of, let's say, extreme weather conditions, increasing temperature, it leads to disruption in agriculture productivity or output. Why? Because of increasing temperature, extreme weather events, it leads to disruption in the agriculture output. Let's say because of temperature, or let's say because of excessive rainfall, all the crops that were sown are destroyed. There is no agriculture output. There is no agriculture output. Now, because of the disruption in the agriculture output, right, 2.5 billion, the livelihood of 2.5 billion people will be affected. 2.5 billion people. Why? Because of the disruption in the agriculture output. So, here the challenge or the problem that we understood is with respect to dependence on the fossil fuels in agriculture, which means in agriculture we are dependent on the fossil fuels, which means we are increasing the environmental footprint in the agriculture sector. First challenge. Second, energy poverty and inequities. Energy poverty and inequities. Now, if you see the low income countries or the poor countries, they do not have proper energy infrastructure, which means they do not have money to invest in the renewable sector. If I talk about rural areas, now rural areas, there is no supply of electricity. Now, because of lack of supply of electricity in the rural areas, the agriculture productivity suffers. There is no agriculture productivity. Productivity. Why? Because there is no electricity. Now, as the agriculture productivity is getting hit, which means there is shortage of food in the market. And as there is shortage of food in the market, it leads to surge of food prices. And as the food prices have increased, the poor people cannot afford it. It leads to more and more poverty. So this is a vicious cycle. This is a vicious cycle because of energy poverty, which means the low income countries are disproportionately affected because of energy poverty. For example, if I talk about the sub-Saharan African region, it is one of the poorest regions in the world. Third, geopolitical risks and supply chain disruptions. Now, in the year 2021, China China banned a fertilizer named as phosphate. Now, India is highly dependent on this fertilizer for agriculture production. Now, as China banned this fertilizer, it led to shortage of this fertilizer in the market. Now, if there is shortage in the market, it leads to increase in prices. If it leads to increase in prices, subsequently, it also leads to increase in food prices. So, if food prices go up, people cannot afford, leads to again vicious cycle of poverty. Next, uneven transition to renewable energy. Now, if you see, until 2022, until 2022, the renewable sector in the world got an investment of $50 billion. By 2022, the renewable sector got an investment of $500 billion. Of all the investment in the renewable sector, close to 85% investment was done in the developed countries. Which means when the world demands that the world should shift towards renewable sector, right? Here we see large or close to 85% investment is done in the developed countries. So the question is, if the focus is on the developed countries, how are we going to address the energy poverty issue? How will we address the energy poverty issue? So if there is shortage of energy, it affects the food production, increase in food prices, poverty, vicious cycle. So the point is, we have to ensure that the renewable sector or investments are also flowing in the developing countries as well as poor countries. Now, despite the fact that 500 billion was invested by 2022, there is still heavy dominance of the fossils, which means despite the fact that this huge amount was invested, right, the world is still heavily dependent on the fossil fuels. For example, countries like, because of domestic as well as because of international pressure, countries like USA and Brazil are still producing oil and natural gas. Why? One, because of domestic pressure. and second is because of international pressure or shortage of oil and natural gas in the international market. So, if you see developed country like USA and developing country like Brazil, they are focusing on the fossil fuels. So, this is another, another challenge, and because of the dependence on fossil fuels, again this gets exposed to volatile price shocks. Again, the same vicious cycle continues. Dependence on fossil fuels will lead to the food system getting affected, which means the agriculture output takes a hit. Why? Again, same geopolitical tension, shortage of energy. Now, if there's shortage of energy, the agriculture productivity takes a hit. Agriculture productivity. If agriculture productivity is taking a hit, which means now, if you see agriculture productivity is taking a hit, which means now the prices of food will increase. If the prices goes up, poverty, vicious cycle. Then competing demands on agriculture. Now, agriculture has got a dual role. One, to feed the global population, right? And second is to make a shift to renewable sector, renewable sector. So this is the dual role of agriculture, to feed the global population as well as to shift. Why? Because here we discuss agriculture is heavily dependent on fossil fuels. So there's a demand that agriculture should, be in the transition to renewable sector or clean energy. So the question is, how are we going to balance food production and energy security? There's global poverty, there are hunger issues in the world, and agriculture has got a heavy responsibility, a massive responsibility of feeding the global population. At the same time, we also need to shift towards clean energy. How do you balance is a major challenge and question. So these are some of the challenges in the agriculture sector, right? I hope you understood all the challenges. Any challenge, if you're not understood, please let us know in the comment box, right? So the question is, sir, how can we end poverty cycle? How can we end poverty cycle is a question asked. See, in order to end poverty cycle, we have to ensure that we are transitioning to the renewable sector. Let's say, for example, once we transit to renewable sector like solar energy, wind energy, this will lead to stability in the agriculture. Why? Because now the supply is secure. In the fossil fuels, let's say for example, if there's shortage of oil or natural gas, it leads to agriculture productivity taking a hit. Now we are focusing on solar energy or wind energy. Now there's no problem of supply side. The supply side is secure. So if you have energy, or if there's regular supply of energy, then it will lead to increase in food productivity, agriculture productivity. And this agriculture productivity, which means the prices of food will be stable, which means all the people, especially the poor people, can also afford the food. This is how we can end the poverty cycle, right? Now let us try to understand the data from the 2024 global report on food crisis. Now this report states that 12% rising hunger, 12% of the world population has hunger issues, are they are suffering from hunger. And the number of people who will face insecurity, or the number of people facing insecurity will only increase. For example, in between 20 and 2023, in between 20 and 2023, in these 3 years, 11.3 percentage, 11.8 percentage of the global population faced 11.8% of the global population faced food insecurity. Food insecurity. Now, energy insecurity's impact on food system. So again, if the energy is insecure, which means if there is shortage of energy in the global market, if there is shortage of energy in the global market, this will affect the agriculture productivity, which would lead to poverty. And poverty, again, the same hunger problem, poverty, vicious cycle. Vulnerable regions, for example, as we discussed, sub-Saharan. Sub-Sahara is a region in the Northwest Africa. Northwest Africa. As I told you, it is considered to be one of the poorest regions in the world, right? So when it comes to food insecurity, please mention about this data. Very, very important for you to mention about this data in your examination, right? Yes. So we have discussed the challenges. We have discussed the 2024 Global Insecurity Report. Now we shall discuss the solution. So what is the solution? No one can dispute the fact that it's high time that the world has to transition to renewable sector. When I talk about renewable sector, the focus has to be on solar energy, wind energy, biofuel, biofuel. Why? Because if we continue putting pressure on the environment and releasing the harmful greenhouse gases, this would lead to more and more food insecurity problems, lead to more and more poverty, which will disturb the law and order situation of the world. And that is the reason it is very important that we promote renewable sector, which means we have to focus on energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, solar, wind, biofuel, nuclear energy, right? And it is very important that we ensure that this renewable sector is deployed in the agriculture. Why? We discussed that of all the greenhouse gas emissions, 12% or agriculture contributes to 12% of the global greenhouse gas emission. That's the reason deployment of renewable energy in the agriculture sector is very, very important. Second, addressing the global food and energy insecurity together. Now, the global policy framework has to focus on the integrated approach, which means we have discussed that energy insecurity and food insecurity are interlinked. So the global framework has to focus on an integrated manner, which means the world has to ensure that both the government and the private sector is investing in the renewable sector, and most importantly, it is very important to note that the developed countries, or for that matter the world, has a responsibility to ensure that developing as well as the poor countries are transitioning to renewable sector. Why? Because if we continue emitting the harmful gases or greenhouse gas emission, right, the climate change will not affect only one country. The climate change will affect the entire world. So it is the responsibility of the world to ensure that the world is transitioning towards renewable sector, right? And if I talk about India, now also India is also ensuring that the efforts of India is directed towards renewable sector. For example, in order to help the agriculture sector or farmers in agriculture, the government of India has started Pradhan Mantri Kisan Urja Suraksha Evam Uthan Mahabhiyan, that is PM Kusum scheme. The purpose is to help the farmers to give solar powered pumps to the farmers. Now India has a target of producing 500 gigawatt of energy, or rather clean energy, by 2030. As of now, India has produced close to 200 gigawatt of clean energy. The target is to reach 500 gigawatt of clean energy by 2030 through solar, wind, nuclear, etc. Right? So again, here we can mention the global examples. For example, in the African regions, especially in Kenya, the country focused on the solar powered irrigation, which means the country helped the farmers with these solar pumps, and this changed the agriculture scenario in the country. It led to more agriculture productivity, and this had a direct bearing on the overall economy of the country. Talking about Brazil, what is biofuel? Biofuel is an energy that is produced from plants and, let's say, agriculture waste. So we are using waste plants and agriculture waste to produce electricity or energy. This is known as biofuel. For example, from sugarcane, corn, oil seeds, we can produce biofuel. So Brazil has produced methanol from sugarcane crop, and this biofuel production has been largely successful in the country. So here Brazil was successful in ensuring that, or it was successful in balancing what? Food food production food production and energy security. So this is what we can learn, or the world can learn from these countries. These are some international examples which you should mention in the exam. So I hope you have understood the first topic, right? Now let us start with the second topic. What is the second topic? Indians need the right to disconnect, right? So in this article, we'll discuss the concept of right to disconnect. So you may mark this under GS paper 2 means, and in means we have the subtopic in the name, important aspects of governance. So the question is, does the right to clean environment entail a legal regulation on burning crackers during Diwali? Discussed in the light of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution and judgments on the of the apex, that is Supreme Court, in this regard. So the question is right to clean environment. Similarly, right questions can be asked on right to privacy, right to clean energy, right to clean air, right to be forgotten, or rather right to disconnect. So the emerging rights that are evolving in the world, UPSC can or may ask a question on the emerging rights. So what is the context? The context is that recently in a company, E&Y, Ernst and Young, it's a company in the services sector. One young female employee committed suicide. Why? Because she was undergoing work stress and pressure which forced her to, end her life. Now this incident, it sparked a global debate on right to disconnect. So what is right to disconnect? Which means you should disconnect from the workplace or from the work once you leave the office. You should not carry the office work in your house. Shashi Tharoor raised a very important point in the parliament. He raised that, or he highlighted that it is very important that the employee should be treated with respect in the workplace. And that's the reason we need a law, we need a legislation to legislate out inhumanity at the workplace, which means inhumanity, bad treatment in the workplace should not be tolerated at all. And that's the reason we need a law to, get rid of inhuman treatment at the workplace. Now, a recent report highlighted that almost 50% women in the media, IT, and auditing are facing extreme stress, and this is taking a toll on their physical as well as mental well-being. I mean, if you look at people who work in the unorganized sector, now unorganized sector, it contributes or constitutes 90% of the workforce. Unorganized or rather informal sector, which means the sector is not guided by any rules, laws, nothing. There is no government oversight in the informal or unorganized sector. And in this informal or rather unorganized sector, the employers, they mistreat the people or mistreat the employees. And that's the reason it is very important that we take this particular issue seriously. Now, if you see that there's a rise in digital communication, there's a rise in digital communication. So if you see, the employers expect the workers to work even when they go home, right? So this thin line between your work and your personal life is getting blurred. Why? Because of the expectation or because of the digital communication. So especially if you are working at a senior level position, you are expected to work even when you are at home. And this is again taking a toll on your mental and physical well-being. And many people are even committing suicide. I know many people who are working in the private sector and are facing so many health issues, acidity, back issue, mental stress. And that's the reason we have to take very important this particular issue. Now, when it comes to progressive laws or progressive legislation, the Western countries are always one step ahead. Not one step ahead, they're 10 steps ahead. So for example, if you see these countries, France, Portugal, Spain, Australia, Ireland, all these countries have framed a law. They have made a law wherein the law says that the employees are not expected to work after the office hours. And if the employer expects an employee to work after the office hours, the company will be penalized. No action will be taken against an employee if he is not working after office hours or if he does not pick up or receive calls after office hours. So these are the countries that have framed progressive laws, that is right to disconnect laws. So in the year 2023, Australia introduced workers' right to disconnect in the year 2023. Now, India does not have a specific law with respect to right to disconnect. However, in the directive principle of state policy, Article 36 to 51, For example, Article 39. Article 38 and 39. Article 38 deals with the workplace environment. Article 38 and 39, they deal with the workplace environment, which means the workplace environment should be conducive for working. It also looks after the protection of the workers' health. So, the environment at the workplace and the health of the employees is something that this directive principle of state policy tries to address. Then we have certain observations made by the Supreme Court. For example, in the Vishaka versus state of Rajasthan versus state of Rajasthan, the Supreme Court 1997, the Supreme Court referred, Supreme Court 1997, the Supreme Court held that it is very important for the employers to ensure the dignity of the workers or employees is maintained, which means employers cannot trample upon the dignity of the employees or rather the workers in the company, right? So this is a very important judgment or observation made by the Supreme Court in the Visakha versus state of Rajasthan case of 1997, which means the working environment has to be peaceful, conducive for the workers to work in a very free and transparent manner. Any indignity cannot be tolerated as per the Supreme Court guideline in the year 1997. Then in the Ravindra Dhariwal versus Union of India 2021, Ravindra Dhariwal versus Union of India case, in the year 2021, the Supreme Court expanded the meaning of Article 14. Article 14, it expanded the meaning of Article 14. What is Article 14? Right to equality. Now it expanded Article 14 by saying that the people with disabilities, that is differently abled people, the employers had to ensure that accommodations are provided to people with disabilities. This is another important observation made by the Supreme Court. The third, Uttarakhand High Court in the year 2012. The UK, the Uttarakhand High Court in the year 2012 held that the superiors cannot use their position to harass the employees, which means they cannot put undue pressure on the employees. If they use their extreme excessive authority to demean the workers, then even this is action can be taken against such employees or against such superiors, which means again it reinforced the importance of dignity the Supreme Court referred to in the Visakha versus state of Rajasthan case. But unfortunately, despite the provision in the Indian Constitution DPSP Article 38 and 39, despite the Supreme Court observation, multiple times the Supreme Court has referred to safe working environment, right to work with dignity. The fact of the matter is, majority, more than 50 percentage, close to 80-90 percentage employers or companies are such where the working environment is stressful. Lots of pressure is given or is expected out of employees. The superiors mistreat their employees, and unfortunately, the government takes no action. And people are not aware of the rights, and this is taking heavy toll on the mental and physical well-being. You can ask anyone who is working in the private sector or rather in government sector. I'm pretty sure if you ask 10 people, out of 10 people, 7 to 8 people would have experienced inhumane treatment, extreme stress at workplace, and this is not good for an individual as well as for the country. Why? Because this affects the overall economic growth of a country, right? And that's the reason it is very important that we need to frame a law which takes into consideration mental health and productivity. Because if the mental health is stable, if the health of the employees or rather the environment is so that employees are in a position to do good work, this will affect or this will increase the productivity of the employee and thus the company. And that's the reason it is very important that it's high time for India to ensure that we need to bring a law thereby regulating the working conditions at the workplace, right? So again, we can learn from countries like France, Australia, Canada, Spain, Portugal, right? And for example, in the year 2018, right, India, for example, Supriya Sule, an MP from Nationalist Congress Party, had introduced a law to regulate the working conditions. Unfortunately, that was a private member bill. And as it was a private member bill, the bill was not passed in the parliament. But yes, it's high time that India has to take this issue seriously and frame a law to regulate the workspace, right? So I hope you understood the second topic as well. Now let's focus on the third topic. Here the Supreme Court said that reservation cannot be given based on sole religion. So what exactly is the case? Let us understand. Now, in the year 2010, the West Bengal government, right? The West Bengal government in the year 2010 issued OBC certificates, or it subcategorized OBC, OBC A and OBC B, which means this government subcategorized the OBC and gave reservation to different castes in the OBC category. Now, it is said that the OBC certificate, majority of the OBC certificates were given to Muslim communities. Muslim communities, right? So, of all the OBC certificates that were given in the year 2010, majority of the OBC certificates were given to the Muslim community, right? There were 77 Muslim communities and the West Bengal government gave the OBC certificate to the Muslim community. In the year 2012, right, the state government, West Bengal government made a law named backward classes other than scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. So in the year 2012, West Bengal government made a law thereby giving 10% and 7% reservation to OBC A and OBC B. So various categories were made under OBC and 10% reservation was given to this and 7% to this. Now this law was challenged in the Calcutta High Court. Calcutta High Court declared that this particular law is unconstitutional. Why? Because West Bengal or the Calcutta High Court said that there is no survey or research done on the basis of which West Bengal government gave reservation to the Muslim communities. Calcutta High Court believed that the West Bengal government on the basis of religion gave reservation to the Muslim communities, and so it said that this law is unconstitutional. Reservation can be given on the basis of backwardness but not on the basis of religion, right? So High Court in the year 2024, Calcutta High Court, it struck the 2012 Act. Now the West Bengal challenged the Calcutta High Court decision before the Supreme Court recently, and this is the context. The decision of Calcutta High Court was challenged by the West Bengal government before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that, or asked the West Bengal government to submit a report to justify that the Muslim communities who were given the reservation benefits were backward, which means you need an evidence the Supreme Court asked the West Bengal government to submit an evidence showing that the OBC certificate given to the Muslim communities were based on report or substantial report, a report backed by evidence. Now the West Bengal government has to file a reply to the question asked by the Supreme Court. This is the topic. This is the topic that appeared on the first page on the Hindu paper. But let us also try to understand few let us try to understand how the reservation policy in our country came into being. Now, if I talk about pre-independence era, right? In the year 1882, for the first time, Jyotirao Phule and William Hunter, they demanded reservation for the backward classes. Then in the year 1902, for the first time, Rajarshi Shahu of Kolhapur is in Maharashtra. Rajarshi Shahu gave reservation to the backward classes and the non-Brahmins for the first time. Reservation was given by Rajarshi Shahu. Now the Government of India Act 1909, the Government of India Act 1909 provided separate electorates for the minorities, And then in the Government of India Act 1935, representation was also given to women and other classes of citizens and other, for example, the laborers were given representation, the backward classes were given representation. So this is how reservation was before independence. After independence, post independence, once India got independent, post our constitution coming into being, the reservation was given only to the SCs and STs, which means a reservation was given on the basis of caste. Why? Because on the basis of caste, right, India had experienced pervasive discrimination on the basis of caste. And that's the reason on the basis of caste, reservation was given only to the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes. But then in the year 1990, reservation was also extended to the other backward classes, that is Mandal Commission. And again in the year 2019, reservation was given to the economically weaker section, people, families who are economically poor. Reservation was given to the EWS as well. So the SCs were given 15% reservation, the STs were given 7.5% reservation, the OBCs were given 27% reservation, and EWS were given how much? 10%. So 49.5 plus 10 percentage, 59.5% reservation. This is post independence. So as I told you, SCs 15, STs 7.5, OBC 27, EWS 10, and which means the remaining, that is 40.5% was reserved for the general category. Now, what do you mean by horizontal reservation? So, let's say we have 27% reservation to the OBCs, right? Now, to give reservation in the OBC category, for example, here let's say we are making reservation, which means 1/3 seats in the OBC will be given to women. Let's say 1/10 seat would be given to differently abled. So SC scheduled caste is a vertical layer. In the vertical layer, we are giving representation to different sections in that vertical layer. Now, if I talk about the scheduled castes, let's say, if I talk about the scheduled caste women or the differently abled people in the scheduled caste, their condition relatively to the men is much more or much worse or rather poor. So here, through horizontal reservation, our constitution or law is trying to address the growing disparities between the different categories in the same vertical category. So let's say we are OBCs, then in OBCs we have women, then we are differently abled. So here we are also trying to address the specific needs of different section in the vertical layer. This is known as horizontal reservation. So types of reservation, vertical, SCs, STs, please you can read, right? And make sure that you are opening the link in the comment box. This link will take you to the DNA notes. In the DNA notes on a website, you can revise the points that we have discussed in the DNA, right? So we give reservation in the education sector, the central educational institutions, in the employment. Then reservation is given in the Lok Sabha, state assembly, local panchayat to the women, right? And these are the constitutional provisions. 15 fundamental right? So you can read the constitutional provisions for the different sections of the society, SCs, STs, OBCs, women, right? I hope you understood the third chapter, right? Okay. Now, what is the next topic? It's a very simple topic, right? So you'll understand of the frigate INS Tushil. Now, recently, a stealth frigate named INS Tushil was commissioned, which means it was brought into action. Where? In Russia. So this is nothing but a warship. It's a warship that was commissioned or it was put into action in Russia. Why? Because this frigate or warship was developed or manufactured in Russia, and this also strengthens India and the Russian relations, right? So, what is frigate? Frigate, as I told you, is nothing but warship. See, I hope you can see this particular picture. So, there are different types of warships. One is the warship. Warship is a ship that can accommodate airplanes. So, the airplanes can be taken off, landed on the warship. This is known as, for example, INS Arihant. It's a warship. It's a warship. So, this is a warship. It's a huge ship. Now, this warship cannot be, stationed on the shore because you need deep water, right? So, these are the different types of warships. We have aircraft carrier, then we have cruiser, then we have destroyer, then we have frigate. So, frigate is one type of warship. Which are the different types of warship? We have aircraft carrier, then we have cruiser, then we have destroyer, we have destroyer, then we have frigate, then we have corvette, then we have submarine. Submarine is underwater. So these are the different types of warship, and these different types of warship, they differ with respect to their agility and speed, which means the speed differs, right? Now, if I talk about INS frigate, this class of warship, see, the purpose of the INS frigate is to protect the warship, aircraft carrier. Now, aircraft carrier, see, you have to protect your aircraft carrier. So, in the ancient, battles, there were like around 15, 20, 50 soldiers surrounding the king. Because if the king dies, then the battle is lost. Similarly, if your aircraft carrier is lost in a war, you lose the battle. That's the reason there are different types of warships that protect this particular aircraft carrier. Then the different types of warship, they also focus on maritime operations. For example, let's say a small operation has to be undertaken, or let's say we have to deal against the pirates. So, or let's say for example, India and different countries, for example, I hope you know that India with different countries, right, they undertake joint operations for maritime surveillance to ensure that no illegal activity is happening in the maritime space. That's the reason we have joint operations. So, for such joint operations, different types of warships can be used, right? Now, there are four classes of frigates. Which are this? Now, you have to remember these classes of frigates. For example, we have Shivalik frigate, then we have Talwar frigate, then we have Kamota class frigate. These are the different classes of frigates. And then the fourth, the fourth class of frigate is Nilgiri class frigates. You don't have to remember the names of ships under these classes, but at least remember the classes of frigates. Why? Because frigate has often been seen in the newspaper, or rather in the news. That's the reason UPSC may ask a question exactly what is frigate and which are the different classes of frigates. So remember the four classes of frigates. As I told you about INS Tushil. Now INS Tushil is a frigate under the class Talwar. It was commissioned recently in the month of December 2024. Now it has advanced stealth feature, which means it can escape the radar. Now the radars are used for detection of warships. This INS Tushil is equipped with advanced technology through which it can escape detection, which makes it easy for a country to attack an enemy. At the same time, this INS Tushil is used for black water operation, which means this operation, right, refers to maritime surveillance in high seas, that is very far away from the Indian shore, very far away from the Indian shore, to ensure that the maritime space is peaceful, no illegal activities happening in the high seas, right? This is referred to as blue water operations. Referred to as blue water operations. I hope you understood the topic, right? Now let us focus on the fifth topic. Now this, you need to understand the essence of the topic. See, these days or since the past few years, the farm sector, right, or the poultry sector or the livestock has seen increased use of antibiotics. What is antibiotic? So whenever you suffer from cold or cough, it is because of bacteria. So in order to defeat the bacterial infection, antibiotics is prescribed. So antibiotics is prescribed. Why? To fight against the bacteria, unwanted bacteria present in your body. But here we see that of all the usage of antibiotics, 70% of antibiotics is used in the livestock sector, in the poultry sector, in the dairy sector. So more than animals, or more than human beings, animals are consuming or having the antibiotics. Why? See, for example, the livestock, the pigs, the sheep. Now, people rear these animals. Why? Let's say for milk, for meat, milk and meat, right? Now, to raise these animals, you need a huge space, hygienic condition, proper ventilation, so that these animals will give, good quality meat or good quality dairy product or milk. But we do not have this huge space, neither ventilation, which means the animals will be infected of bacteria. To fight against these bacteria, antibiotics are given to the animals. Antibiotics are given to the animals. Now the antibiotics the usage has been overdose, which means the usage of antibiotics is more than the prescribed level or prescribed limit, because of which the bacteria is present in the animals. Now we do not have a big space, no hygienic condition, the animals are kept in cramped spaces, there is no proper ventilation, the animals suffer bacterial infection, antibiotics are given to the animals. Now these antibiotics or the bacteria have become resistant free. Because of the overdosage, the bacteria have become resistant to antibiotics, which means the animals that you milk, or rather the meat that we have, is infected. So the milk, paneer, meat that we eat is contaminated with antibiotics, and we are actually consuming contaminated food. So if you see this map, right, if you see this map, countries like, let's say, Australia, India, Pakistan, for every kg of, so if you see here, so for every kg of meat, for every kg of meat, 114 milligram of antibiotics. For every kg of meat, there is presence of 114 milligram of antibiotics for every kg of meat. So if you see here, this is India, this is Australia, this, if you see, this is 200 mg. So China is using more antibiotics. But if you look at the, African continent or the Western countries, if you look at Norway, Norway uses only 4 milligram per kg of meat, which means the regulation of antibiotics in the Western countries is more strict, or it is regulated better. So the lesson that we need to learn from this topic is for the government to regulate the use of antibiotics, and by the time the government regulates antibiotics in the livestock sector or agriculture sector, do not eat meat, or for that matter dairy products. This is a lesson that you need to learn, else what we are eating, consuming is nothing but contaminated food. So the antibiotics that are given to animals, the human beings are consuming it, unfortunately. That's the reason these days doctors are advising against eating, dairy products, or rather non-vegetarian food. And that's the reason people focus on the organic food these days. So this was the fifth topic. I hope students you understood each and every topic. Any topic, any point that you have not understood, I request you to please ask in the comment box. Now let us refer the questions. The first one is, discuss the interrelationship between the food security and energy security. How do these challenges impact global stability, and what integrated solution can be implemented? Question is very simple. In the introduction, highlight the interconnectedness of the food and the energy system. Then the body of the answer, highlight the food security challenges because of high temperature, because of geopolitical tensions, right? Then energy security, again the same geopolitical tensions, right? Interlinking issues. So in the body, first highlight the challenges that we have discussed with respect to, for example, the agriculture is over dependent on the fossil fuels. Now this exposes the food system to volatile price shocks, right? First discuss on the challenges, then discuss the solution, that is we have to focus on the renewable sector. also try to give the examples, international examples of Kenya and Brazil, right? So this is how you frame. Now the description or detailed answer you will find in the DE notes, the link which is mentioned in the comment box, right? Second question, discuss the concept of right to disconnect and its relevance in the Indian context. Examine the international precedents and the need for similar legislation in India. Very, very simple question. Again, in the introduction, discuss with the recent incident of an young employee in Ernst& Young who committed suicide because of extreme work pressure. Then focus on the body of the answer. Focus on the issues that is arising because of work pressure and how the you know how the world is reacting to the work pressure. For example, countries like France, then Ireland, Australia have brought a law to regulate the working condition. Then come to India. India, there is no specific law, but mention about the directive principle of state policy, Article 38 and Article 39. Then mention the Supreme Court judgments. For example, Visakha versus State of Rajasthan, judgment of 1997, the Uttarakhand High Court judgment of 2012, right? And then finally, in the solution part or in the conclusion, highlight that how the work stress or pressure affects the work productivity of not the employee but also the overall company, and that is the reason it is important that we frame a law to ensure that the environment or the working hours are regulated in the office spaces, right? Again, the detailed answer you will find it in the DNA notes. Now, these are the questions that we discussed, or these are the questions based out of the topics that we discussed yesterday. The first question, who initiated the Mule Hunter AI initiative to address inefficiencies in traditional fraud detection systems using AI or machine learning for faster and more accurate detection of mule accounts? So, it's a very simple question. As we discussed this particular question yesterday, so it is very easy for you to answer the question. Correct answer is Reserve Bank Innovation Hub in Bengaluru. So, in order to deal with the cyber criminals and the way they are using mule accounts to siphon off the money or using it for money laundering purpose, RBI is using technology. RBI is using artificial intelligence and machine learning to ensure that all the mule accounts are detected and India is safe from cyber criminals. The second topic, Indian star tortoise is endemic to which of the following regions? Now, given that this particular species is at risk, is vulnerable under IUCN, right? It is important for you to remember all the features or characteristics with respect to Indian star tortoise. So, all the species that you come across news, right? It is important to remember the IUCN status, right? So, here this species is endemic to India, Sri Lanka and the parts of Pakistan. So, the correct answer is option A. Next question. India is a member of which of the following regional groupings? NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So, India is not a part of NATO. Quad, yes, India is part of Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. What is AUKUS? AUKUS stands for Australia, United Kingdom and United States. Even India is not part of NATO, AUKUS, and then CSTO is Collective Security Treaty Organization, also referred to as Warsaw Pact. So, post Cold War, the Western countries came up with NATO and Warsaw Pact led by Russia, right? So, even India is not a part of this, which means the correct answer is only option A, right? And these are the questions based out of today's topic. So, I request you to please refer to these questions, question number 1 and question number 2, and make sure that the link of this quiz is given in the comment box. So, please open the link, right, and attempt these questions. I request you to attempt these questions and post your score in the comment box. all that you require from our side, you're free to request, and we'll make sure that we deliver to your demand so as for you to help to succeed in UPSC examination. So all the help that you require from our side, we are there for you, right? So make sure you're listening to the DNA regularly and writing down the points, and most importantly, you're revising all the topics that we discuss. Right, students? So that's it from today's DNA. I hope you enjoyed and loved watching all the topics of the day, right? So before I call it a wrap, I request you to please like, subscribe and share Narayana Eyes. Thank you so much.